Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we wrap up our current Haunted House retrospective with Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comics Psycom from Tokyo Pop and Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also joining us from Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. Okay. According to Wikipedia, Beetlejuice is a 1988 American comedy fantasy film directed by Tim Burton, produced by the Geffen Company, and distributed by Warner Brothers. The plot revolves around a recently deceased young couple, and that's Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, which is kind of wild to recognize that. I had forgotten that. Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, who've become ghosts, haunting their former home, and an obnoxious, devious ghost named Beetlejuice, played by Batman, Michael Keaton from the Netherworld, who tries to scare away the new inhabitants, a new family made up of Catherine O'Hara of SCTV, Jeffrey Jones of Ferris Bueller, and Winona Ryder of Being Winona Ryder. So, all right. What an interesting movie to see this was. First impressions. Let's go, Drew, because you put us up to this. Drew, Joya, Tony, and then
I'll say this like it was torture.
No, not at all. But it was quite a risk. I had no idea what I was getting into because I'd completely forgotten what this movie was about. So, lay it on us. First impressions, and let's keep it short so we can get into the meat of this subject. But I'd love to know why this is one of your favorite films, Beetlejuice.
I have probably seen Beetlejuice literally more than any other movie that I have ever seen. It was a favorite of my brother's growing up, and we would actually watch it almost every day after school, and when we were in junior high. And we had the soundtrack, which we listened to a lot. It was a favorite around my house. I have a lot of nostalgic feelings. I mean, also like what kid, during at this time period who was what weird kid, I should say, did not have a bit of a crush on Winona Ryder in this movie. So there's that. And come on, I mean, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, that's got to be one of the all-time great ghoulish characters. I just, that's a character that in my more shall we say, antisocial moments that I find myself leaning very heavily on. Like, I feel like Beetlejuice is a sort of character that all of us kind of secretly wish we could be more like, because he's completely unhinged and not bound by society's rules about being polite or nice, even remotely nice to each other. And there's something kind of cool and, dare I say, punk rock about Beetlejuice.
So incredibly strange. Yes. All right. Fantastic. Julia, have you seen Beetlejuice before?
Yeah, a long time ago. And it's so funny because I always think of it as the Michael Keaton movie, but he's really only in about 17 minutes of the movie. Yeah. But he does make such an impression. I mean, you introduced him as Batman, and it's actually kind of the Joker in this movie. He's kind of reminiscent of.
I think that's true.
Of the Joker. He's it's such a brilliant performance. He says it's his favorite performance of his own. And he improvised a lot of it, so it was really fun. I had just kind of forgotten, like, the rest of the movie. I'd forgotten Alec Baldwin, I'd forgotten Gina Davis. They do what they're supposed to do, but there's nothing really super memorable about them.
The least Alec Baldwin performance.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now, of course, Winona Ryder was in her element here. This is the Winona Ryder before Tim Burton discovered Helena Bonham Carter, which I'm sure she would have been this role.
This is truly the way I remember Winona Ryder. I mean, this is the way, Winona Ryder as sort of the alt-it girl, I think, of 1988 that's definitely this is the Winona, the Dayton Kiefer Sutherland Winona Ryder that I think Drew's right that everybody fell in love with.
Mm-hmm.
But did you have any other first impressions?
I mean, it's a fun movie. It's really, really fun. I enjoy it.
All right, Tony, and you might bring an art perspective to this. What are your thoughts seeing Beetlejuice again after all these years?
It had been a while. I think Rain had rented it a while back, but don't know if I saw it. I think it was like I was at a convention or somewhere, and she's like, "Well, I'm going to watch Beetlejuice again." I don't even know I don't own it, which I should own it because, you know, I like this era of Tim Burton. I really like the movie. My brother and sister and I used to watch it. I think we had it taped or something, and I remember watching it a bunch. But it had been a while since I'd seen it. It's really good. Awesome practical effects. Lots of great stop motion. Lots of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, this, for better or worse, you know, because sometimes, you know, kitschy things can become, you know, I've seen people take it a little bit to the extreme, but, you know, this was the Weird Kids movie. You know, you kind of got, when you saw this movie at the time it was released, you were like, yeah, Tim Burton, you speak for us, you know.
Yes.
I'm Tim Burton and I speak for the trees. It was like that, you know, like, it was awesome. And, you know, you really felt like, yes, this movie is something special. And again, I mean, the character of Beetlejuice, all of that stuff is just really great. Like, you can really tell that Keaton's just having a blast being that character. It really shines through. So, I think it was really great. It's interesting that it's kind of a different take on, you know, kind of some Tim Burton tropes where he, you know, he's not railing against suburbia. He's more like kind of almost railing against gentrification in a way.
Yes.
Like what? It's kind of a twist on all of the stuff that he usually kind of goes for. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I really dig it. That's, you know, it's a cool movie, and I'm glad we're covering it because it's pretty awesome.
As soon as I'm done, I'll give my brief first impression, and then I want to go straight into something you mentioned, which is Tim Burton. You know, what is it? What is this era's Tim Burton, and how do we place it into his body of work? And what is it? Why is everybody in love with this period of Tim Burton? Okay, I had completely forgotten all about this movie, which is funny because it's one that pops up, but it just has become a mental speed bump. I'd see people mention Beetlejuice and so forth, but I was not prepared popping in for the cleverness of this sort of this hipsterish couple that young Alec Baldwin and young Gina Davis play. The awesome.
You think they're hipsters? I think the yuppie couple that moves in are more like hipsters to me.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's a good question as to whether, I think it's completely anachronistic for me to call them hipsters, but there's something sort of twee about the fact that they are flannel-wearing, Harry Belafonte listening,
no, she's wearing that dress that she's wearing is so like prairie. I mean, it's
so
not.
So you're suggesting that they're not hip. They're completely sincere in this.
There's no sense of irony to what they're wearing.
Yes, I think.
So in other words,
now I think that brings something else we should talk about, which is how this has influenced things. We should talk about that at some point because I really was struck with some of that.
Yeah.
While watching it, and again, that's why I added at the beginning for better or worse.
Yeah.
But I think there's some really great things that have come with this camaraderie of Tim Burton. I think there's also been some just eye-rollingly self-parodying things that have come out of it.
Speaking with the young couple for just a second, to describe them, they've bought this. They've clearly moved from the city. They're a couple of educated kids, but so I'll buy what you guys are saying, which is that there's no irony at all to them. There are a couple of people who really like wearing, you know, deeply dorky clothing. You know, like
he owns a hardware store. He's not a cool guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's wearing, you know, high-waisted khakis. She's wearing this floral print dress that she may well have made herself. But they're not Ma and Pa Ingalls. They're just, they're regular folk, but they have some really interesting tastes. I mean, they've decorated inside. They like to listen to Harry Belafonte music all the time. I mean, they're real characters. It's really cool. But if you described this couple to me today, I would think, well, that sounds like a couple of Brooklyn hipsters, Like they probably picked up the Belafonte CD at Starbucks. And
which I can say, like, that probably came from, wow, that was cool, or ha, it's ironic that I would like this ironic thing, less than these people who are sincerely like I said, that's what some of this kind of stuff has wrought, as irony becomes a thing that's cool.
Oh, wow.
Not truly cool in my opinion, but as irony has replaced actually being cool, that kind of stuff happens.
Well, my
so
brain
I think that's
is
why
literally like turning in on itself as I try to decide.
Literally?
Well, I mean, yeah, literally.
That's pretty
I don't
disturbing
think
right
there's
there.
anything wrong in
But I mean, for instance, I might like to listen occasionally to like Peggy Lee or the Jackie Gleason Orchestra, especially at Christmas time. But then there's always the question is, am I enjoying this because I find it catchy or because I find it a little bit kitschy? And sometimes I don't know. And I often wonder when I'm enjoying something, does the inside of my brain have any awareness whatsoever as to whether there's any irony to my enjoying something?
I love the line, somebody says, deliver me from L.
Yes. Oh, that's clever. Yeah. Well, okay. She brings it. So Catherine O'Hara brings in this extremely fey clairvoyant who is.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's also
interior decorator.
Yeah, he's sort of her decorator / life coach who just hangs out. It's delightful. But before we get into the rest of the cast, I want to go back to this question of, this is a Tim Burton movie, like with a big capital TB. Why do we love Tim Burton of this era? I'm going to assume that Tony said those words deliberately, that there is such a thing as a Tim Burton of this era, and that
this is definitely the early. This is right after Pee-wee's Big Adventure. This is at the start of him becoming a big director. This is even before Batman.
Yeah.
It's lighter. I mean, the thing is, he got really dark. Like he eventually kind of. I still love his stuff. I mean, I love all his stuff. But I feel like this is a much more, it's a comedy, it's upbeat, it's fun, and it's still Tim Burton. It still has that flair of, that whole...
There's a death obsession.
Yeah, the death obsession, but it's like lighthearted. It's not this, let's everybody kill ourselves.
Well, I think it's also...
Well, they sort of make fun of... I mean, they can have their cake and eat it too, but they, it's almost Tim Burton turning the joke back on himself through the Lydia character. Cause,
exactly.
I mean, her I think one of the best lines in the movie is, Lydia says to Beetlejuice that he wants her to take her to the afterlife, and his reaction is, why?
Right.
And why would you want to do that?
So what are the elements that are Burton-esque? I mean, so
I think here's my thoughts also on why it's of this era is that it's hard when you have a large body of work, especially a stylized body of work, that eventually when people go, oh, that's Tim Burton, it becomes absorbed into pop culture, right? And Tim Burton really speaks to people or you wouldn't have that kind of absorption, right? But he also becomes a parody of himself through no fault of his own, but in the fact, like, if you're always going to be partnered, like they're part of a team, so he's going to use Danny Elfman, but there's a great video, and I think we've talked about it before, where it's, inside the mind of Tim Burton, and he has all the tropes. Hey, do you have any of that makeup? And the makeup woman pulls up this big can of white makeup and goes, of course. And he's like, get my wife and get, Johnny Depp on the phone. The agent opens it, and it's got 2 buttons.
Right.
And those 2 people, like his casting agent.
He says,
and so,
I can't not do those things.
Yeah, exactly. And
he's got Danny Elfman, Johnny Depp, and Helena Bonham Carter, so really 3 at this point.
Well, Danny Elfman. He's like, Danny Elfman, what are you going to do? And he goes, you know. And so, like, and again, like, maybe through no fault of his own, but when you stay in that era, like, you know, it does kind of get a little old. It's hard to keep going with new things and not become a parody of yourself. And so I think at this point we've also got like a purity. There's a purity and a newness to it, a pre-Hot Topic, a every single piece of merchandise that can be made from Nightmare Before Christmas. And granted, I have a lot of that stuff, so I'm not throwing the first stone or anything. I'm not saying, and that there's no judgment call on that, but you live in a world at this point that doesn't have all of that, and so there's a different feel to it. There's a different vibe, and he's bringing something like, this is, you know, pouring my heart out into the world. Another artist who did that, you know, you may or may not like his work, but you know, Kevin Smith talked it when he showed Tusk at Fantastic Fest, and he said, hey, you know, I strip mine my entire life for these movies that I made, and I'm just when I quit, he's like, I quit because I just didn't know what else I could tell, because I didn't have extra stories. Like, I'd been doing that for so long. And I think there's a little bit of that, and I think the Lydia character may be a parody and also a a piece of Tim Burton is in that character as well. And so there's a lot of like in a lot of his stuff, especially from this time period, there's a lot of meta kind of stuff going on. And, but it's told really well.
You think of her as being part of the era that, you know, that this we're looking at Tim Burton, and but it's actually she was like the last person to be considered for Lydia. It was a bunch of other people: Lori Loughlin, Diane Lane, Sarah Jessica Parker, Brooke Shields, Justine Bateman, Molly Ringwald, and Jennifer Connelly all turned down the role.
It's hard to envision Lori Loughlin in this role.
I know.
Well, Beetlejuice was also almost Sammy Davis Jr., which I actually would love.
He wanted
I'd love to see the alternate reality version of that.
But I think Winona Ryder's definitely a right fit for it. I don't imagine any of those people.
I mean, Heathers is before this, correct? Isn't Heathers like around 85
I
or
don't know.
something?
I don't remember.
You know, so you can kind of see where it's strange that you wouldn't think of Winona Ryder right off the bat. Lori Loughlin would be almost absurd. I mean, she was like the.
Well, it'd be a whole different thing. It wouldn't be the goth kind of.
No, you could put her in the goth outfit. I mean, Lori Loughlin is pretty enough, but she doesn't have the weirdness and certainly that strangely nasal voice that Winona Ryder has. Go ahead, Drew.
The old art, Jesse Farrell was the art director on Halloween Man for a while, and we talked about Tim Burton a lot, and I think both Julia and Tony hit on something he used to say a lot about Tim Burton, is that, you know, Tim Burton, you know, for a good portion of, you know, definitely through, you know, you look at Pee-wee's Big Adventure through Batman Returns. So you could see, you know, he was, even though he was making big films, these were auteur films, and he was putting a lot of himself into it. And he said after a certain point, and he said, you know, the movie he always finger pointed was Planet of the Apes. But, you know, I think you can argue that this starts to seep in a little bit sooner than that. But that he just kind of became stylish director for hire. Like, if you want an interesting looking movie, you can count. Like, I talked about this a lot when we did Dark Shadows. I think Dark Shadows, you know, has a lot of the form and you know, of Beetlejuice, but it doesn't have a lot of the heart. And, you know, it is sort of paint by numbers, because, you know, Julia was talking, you know, Beetlejuice has that black and white color scheme. You know, we very vividly remember Michael Keaton's suit in the last act of the movie, which we heavily, you know, the Sandworms have it too, and we heavily associate that with Tim Burton. But there's also all these other kinds of colors going on in this movie, and Batman also, which was the movie he followed this with. Batman certainly had a much broader color scheme than you know, what we now think of as the Tim Burton, you know, sort of black, white, and red color scheme.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And there's there's art direction all over this thing. You know, everything from and it does seem very, very Burton-like. The fact that he likes things that look like models, you know, things that look like a plastic set. And, you know, I can think back to, like, my own childish interest in fake designs. You know, I think we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, where you come across a Winter Wonderland set up at a department store, and it seems even more magical than actual snow would be because of the, you know, the frosted glass and the wood that's been painted to look like a frozen lake and all that stuff. And Burton really knows how to capture an interest in those things. You know, especially he spends so much time in this movie just sort of being fascinated by this little model of the film that Alec Baldwin has built. Of the town that Alec Baldwin has built. Alec Baldwin has basically built a train set town without a train. He's just making a little miniature, even right up to including his own house plus a little graveyard. And Burton has so much fun looking at it and then zooming way down to it and creating a set of the fake town. I mean, and that does remind me of, if you think of like the Penguins like hideout in Batman Returns, I suppose that was, you know, with all the stripes, barber poles, and the rockets and everything like that. It's. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than that. My God, this is really Tim Burton at his best. I mean, look, maybe that's all you need. I mean, I hate to say this, but if you're a really good artist, maybe you're Tim Burton. How many great pieces of art do you have to make? You know, beyond
I think
which,
he's made a lot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, isn't it okay after a while that he just takes a job and makes Dark Shadows and does whatever?
Of course.
Well,
I mean, I totally think that's. I mean, it's valid. It's some people are able to. I don't know. I mean, I think it's valid that, you know, some people have X amount into them, and I thought it was done. Like, I love Tim Burton, but I was not kind of. It was kind of falling into like, I don't know, Alice in Wonderland. You're kind of just doing whatever. That was the one that really kind of broke me. But then I saw Frankenweenie, the 3D animated one, and I really enjoyed it. And it was like, I'm like, hey, dude, you're back. Like, it's like the friend you haven't seen in a while. Oh, man, you're back. Yeah, well, let's recall old times. Oh, that was great. Like, I really, really enjoyed that movie, and it really felt, you know, for whatever reason, it felt back to that genuine, you know, whether or not it was because, you know, the original Frankenweenie was a very much of a pet project of his.
Yes.
And to kind of revisit that world may have been invigorating.
Maybe
he also, you know,
like Steven Soderbergh makes an art film and then makes a commercial film and then makes an art film. Maybe Burton is up to that.
No, but he always makes art films, just that some of them don't work as well.
Some of them are exactly what Drew was talking about.
I get torn as well because on the one hand, like, who am I to say what he's doing is fulfilling or not? I can only go from the perspective of a fan who sometimes, you know, got a little tired of, like, well, you know, you got Johnny Depp and he's in Alice in Wonderland and he's still kind of Willy Wonka here and he's kind of this and that and, you know, this is the way your direction's going. You know, I mean,
I don't think Alice in Wonderland's a fair example because it's a remake or it's a story that's already been told. So you're already starting. In my opinion, if it's a movie that's already been made,
he sure does a lot of that.
Yeah, not really.
He did.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I
really think I agree with Tony though. I think Alice in Wonderland totally feels like self-parody. I wanted to like that movie. Like, my wife and I went to see that on our wedding anniversary as a date, and we were both excited about it.
Oh,
I liked that.
I
didn't like Willy Wonka at all. I thought Willy Wonka was terrible.
Willy Wonka was bad. Willy Wonka was bad too. I'm not defending Willy Wonka. I'm just saying, like, you know, it's.
Well, we spent about 90 minutes discussing Dark Shadows, and we couldn't quite decide whether we liked what he did with that too. So that list, that's 3. Planet of the Apes is 4.
Well, I mean, even when you think about Batman, I mean, Batman is a thing.
Good.
Batman was good,
Nightmare
but
Before
it's
Christmas
still
is awesome.
Yeah.
Batman is good, but it's definitely the good Burton. But I mean, that's not something he originated. That's something he was putting his stamp on. And
I like this movie a lot better than Batman. I mean, I think
this movie is aged a lot better than Batman.
Yeah,
I would
Batman
agree.
has some pacing
I
problems.
like Batman.
I like Batman too. I like Beetlejuice more though.
I think Batman has pacing problems. I truly do. I think but I think that this movie is just a really neat personal work of art, I believe. I mean, I come away from this really impressed by somebody's sort of just vision of a world, and an almost Broadway-like group of a small group of characters, And in fact, let's talk about them a little bit. So as Julia pointed out, the movie's called Beetlejuice, but that's really an accident. The movie was going to be called any number of things. One of them was Ghosts in the House or something like that, or House Ghosts. The point is, Beetlejuice, although quite memorable, is really just.
I liked it. I liked that he was going to call him that. Tim Burton suggested the name Scared Sheetless, and the studio was actually, considered it, and he was like, oh my God, no.
So this movie is about it's this young couple. So we talked a little bit about the hipsterishness or not hipsterishness, the now hipsterishness of the couple, which is Alec Baldwin looking not at all like the. I mean, now we're so accustomed to sort of the way past middle age, suave Alec Baldwin wearing a tuxedo all the time. This is, a good-looking young.
Not God yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's Gina Davis, young and at the middle of her heyday. I don't even know what Gina Davis is up to now.
Now she's on Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, well, there we go. Okay, all right, very good. There's Jeffrey Jones. Who for some reason Tim Burton really likes working with, and I think he's very talented. But Tim Burton has been interested in continuing to work with this guy a lot.
I love Catherine O'Hara. She's so fantastic.
Yeah, that's who I wanted to bring.
Yeah, she's great.
So Catherine O'Hara, I think this might have been the first movie where I was aware of Catherine O'Hara.
She didn't do any Christopher Guest movies before this?
No, those movies didn't exist.
Okay.
I mean, This is Spinal Tap comes along later. I actually can't remember what year.
I would have thought it was earlier. But that's because it's meant to feel earlier.
But where Catherine O'Hara was from SCTV, but I didn't start watching SCTV until later.
Oh, yeah.
Spinal Tap.
It's 1984.
Holy mackerel. So This is Spinal Tap comes out in 84.
Yeah, so it was first.
This is
Spinal
4 years
Tap's
later,
before.
but Catherine O'Hara, I don't recall if she's in that. She's in like the other Christopher Guest movies, but This is Spinal Tap was by Meathead. It was by
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner. Yeah.
Meathead.
God, I mean the
Poor Rob Reiner. He's worked so hard to overcome the Meathead persona. He's still dragged.
In the game of free association that is attempting to host this show live without looking everything up, Meathead is held.
This is the part where I say, Tony and Drew, you're probably too young to remember Meathead.
No, we had reruns.
we had, before the internet, we had television, and you didn't have much choice but to watch reruns of things. So anyway, Catherine O'Hara was well known on SCTV, and she was funny as heck. She was sort of the pretty one, and she would do. So she did Sexy Ladies, but she always was willing to bring this real strangeness to these characters. She did a recurring series of skits about Joey Heatherton, who's like this extraordinarily sexy singer of the late 60s that they're obsessed with on Mad Men. Whenever they want to name a sexy person on Mad Men, they always name Joey Heatherton. And Catherine O'Hara played Joey Heatherton in a series of really weird skits about how she was, Joey Heatherton.
But you're right. I'm looking at her bio, and this is the first movie that she made up. I mean, that she did the SCTV stuff, and then she did a bunch of movies that I've never heard of. But Heartburn she was in. But,
and she plays Catherine O'Hara. So what Drew named it right is if there's sort of the normal, if kind of quiet and not altogether. In other words, they're just the homebodies. The young couple, Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, childless, but they're just homebodies. They like this place. Into their house, once they're dead, comes this extremely snooty.
Well, can we not, let's not forward past their death, though. That's pretty sad.
Oh, okay.
I think we should talk about the fact that they're out in the car, and they just drive off a covered bridge, but before they actually go into the water, they're kind of balanced precariously, and there's this little dog that is keeping them.
Well, they wreck because of the dog, and the dog is the evil villain of the movie, actually.
He is.
Perhaps even more evil than Beetlejuice.
Well, but I mean, I don't think it's evil because he wasn't.
No,
what was he supposed to do? Just stay there for the rest of eternity on that little plank? He had to get off eventually.
A million good dog stories. A million dog stories where, like, the dog sits at the grave of the owner, say yes, that he should have stayed there forever. Julia, just to let you know,
the dog actually is
a really good
by
dog.
Beetlejuice, putting the whole thing in motion.
Yeah, if he was a really good dog, he would have stayed there forever.
Wait,
so there you go.
Beetlejuice has sicked this dog.
No.
No, I'm being.
No, he didn't know about it until after they died. But anyway, so the dog causes them to plunge into the water and drown. And unlike everybody else in the afterlife, they do not walk around wet all the time or bloated or whatever they would look like drowned because it was just too uncomfortable to keep them wet all the time. So they actually look like they did when they were alive, whereas everybody else they run into, it looks like they do at the moment of their death.
Really good point.
Well, that's not my point. It's an IMDb point. But, yes, it is a good point.
No, but they are dead. We've seen these things before, though, where the dead are able to present themselves in multiple ways. Mm-hmm. Where the dead, if they become more aware of their death or more accepting of their fate, they might for a moment see themselves as they were at the moment they died, such as all wet. But in this case, no, they're going to be perfectly normal. And that's what's so strange is that means that, we don't see them drown, thankfully, I suppose. I mean, we just see them come home, quickly surmise that they're dead, and start walking around like a couple of sitcom characters. I mean,
and if they try to leave the house and they plunge into this dolly painting or whatever it is.
They plunge into this really very weird
desert.
Yes, Salvador Dali-like world.
Saturn, by the way, because he says, "Oh, you've been to Saturn."
What makes you say it's Saturn?
Because he says it. He's like, "Oh, you've been to Saturn. I hate the sandworms." Yeah,
weird.
It's just weird. Like, something I always suspect something was on the cutting room floor, or either that, or he just throwing it out. Also, whenever you get an actor improvising, he could have just kind of thrown that out there too.
Yes,
but he talks about, oh, you've been to Saturn. Oh, I hate the sandworms.
Well, they never really explain the sandworms fully, and I kind of like that, because the afterlife is, the afterlife as presented in this movie is still, even though it's got this sort of mundane, bureaucratic veneer on it, it's still also very mysterious.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the afterlife, Drew. Like what do they find themselves having to go through when they find that they're dead?
For one, there's the handbook for the recently deceased, which everybody continuously remarks reads like stereo instructions and is sort of incomprehensible and unhelpful to read. They have a caseworker named Juno, who is this sort of bitter, we've all been to like the DMV or something like that and encountered a lady like this that seems like she has this civic job, but she kind of hates it and is really bitter. And the afterlife seems to be filled with much like how our waking life is, filled with bureaucracy and a lot of waiting in line. And honestly, like the vision of the afterlife in this movie, I don't think any other movie ever really. There's no heaven, there's no hell. There's just this very unique version.
And so one of the rules, it seems to me. So yeah, there's this sort of office building. Although the office building seems like a house, but the office building where the dead go to wait to be able to talk to a caseworker. The caseworker tells them, The next thing they're going to have to go through immediately is that they're going to haunt their house for 125 years. Now, I'm not clear if that's like on their way to the afterlife or what. I don't know what's coming next after that. But
they really don't. They leave that open-ended too, because what they really say to begin with is that they only get X amount of times to talk to their consultant within those 125 years. So that's just a time period, as far as I can tell. It's just a time period of, hey, you get this many chances during this time period, and then we don't know what happens.
But
also,
right.
like
the consultant also said they have 125 years.
Yeah, the DMV. Well, yeah, they can see her 3 times, I think. But anyway, like the DMV part, they also talk about how if you commit suicide, you become one of those people working at the desks. Like the guy who hangs. There's the guy hanging himself. There's another guy who's flattened, who I guess has probably jumped in front of a bus. We can assume. I don't know how it works with the woman who has her throat slit, but there's all that stuff, and it's less of a house to me and just more of a really very DMV-like, except the hallways are real weird and twisted. So what we have is a bureaucracy purgatory, which actually is a pretty good analogy for purgatory if you've sat in a DMV or insurance place for any length of time. That's another thing that's really cool about Burton is that he brings these ideas to light that are pretty succinct and you can understand them. Double so if you're a monster kid.
Yeah.
I think that's the magic.
Go ahead, Drew.
The visualization of these ghostly characters is also really interesting. Like you have the beauty queen that cut her wrists, and she almost looks like a piece of Gil Evgren pinup art gone wrong, and just like the care that is taken in each one of these individual characters, they all stand out. Like you have the big game hunter that has a shrunken head.
Right. Or the guy who'd been flattened. One of their guides along the way is a flattened guy, I guess, who was steamrolled and then driven over.
Well, that's what I was saying. He's a worker, so he's probably, one can assume if workers are suicidal that he, jumped in front of a bus. That's what.
That's possible.
That's the impression I got watching it this time. Yeah.
He's carried along by pulleys. And that's just brilliant. They have special hallways for him that are just these little slits where he can go zoom like one of the doors in Monsters Inc. I mean, this is an astonishing vision. His Juno, which is their caseworker, again, for them to get any answers about the afterlife because they cannot read the actual guidebook that has been left for them. So they go to talk to Juno. Juno is this old lady who reminded me a lot of Martha Ray, who has a really wide mouth, smokes cigarettes constantly, and the smoke comes pouring out of the slice in her neck, which is a hilarious gag that just goes on constantly while they're talking to her. I don't know. That's really wonderful. They quickly work out, though, that they're not going to get any answers, really, other than they're frustrated by the fact that they've got this new family that's moved into their house. Juno says, go figure out how to scare them out. And one more piece of plot exposition happens in this thing that we might as well call the DMV. They see a door with a whole bunch of unhappy ghosts just floating around in space. And this helpful guy says, those are the ghosts that have been exorcised. In other words, so the way the rules of this movie work are, you die, you live in your house as a ghost. The next people that come in, you can try to kick them out. So that they call that bioexorcisms. You can kick out the people who moved into your house, or you can live with them. Either way. But if they kick you out through an exorcism, you are doomed to a second death, which is apparently something really awful and disconnected from reality. So that sets up what the conflict is going to be. These guys want to get rid of this horrible family that's moved in, which we should talk about now. And at the same time, there's this possibility out there that they themselves might be killed once more if this family decides to get serious about getting rid of them. What a weird... We've watched a lot of haunted house movies. This is one of the few, with a couple of obvious exceptions, that take the perspective of the ghosts.
Well, this is also where the people are actually haunting the ghosts, which is almost like the Others, if you think about it.
It's very like The Others. It's very, except for that The Others springs that on us towards the end. We don't really know that we're dealing with ghosts. Whereas in this case, we know they're ghosts straight up, and they very quickly start doing crazy things to manifest their hauntings. But
they're terrible at being ghosts.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
So let's talk about the Dietzes. All right, so you called them gentrifiers, and I think that's partially true. The Dietzes, we mentioned Catherine O'Hara and Jeffrey Jones and the Goff daughter, Lydia, but they've come from New York, and I'm not sure why. It seems to be that Jeffrey Jones wanted a big house, and also he seems to have dried up most of his business opportunities back in New York. But these are some snooty, insanely, I don't know, they have these sort of overblown 80s ideas of art. Catherine O'Hara is a sculptor who makes these hideous giant works of sculpture. You know, but to be honest with you, I have no idea if they're hideous.
I mean, it doesn't start as gentrification. It starts as he's had a breakdown and wants to move out into the country. And,
true.
you know, his wife and her buddy decide to, you know, everything's got to come down, and we're going to gut the house, and we're going to make it artsy, and we're going to do all this stuff. And he would be happy if he's like, that's not why I really...
Yeah, he wants a house in the country.
You know.
And
that's not why I wanted to get out of here. Yeah. But eventually, of course, that turns around where he's like, wait, we're on to something. Like, he can't leave the condo buying and selling real estate dude behind, even though he kind of wanted to, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I had to drop out for a little bit because my phone died, so I'm back. But yeah, I thought that the sculptures were hideous, and what I love is that Catherine O'Hara actually gets like accosted by her own sculptures at various points.
Yes.
So funny.
That's right. One of the gags when they finally start truly haunting her is that they harass. Oh no, that's
and even before that.
Yeah.
No, even before that, when they're trying to add on to the house, and they're like, the crane is lifting up one of her sculptures, and it's like they're breaking windows with it, and at one point it traps her against the wall. So that's like foreshadowing.
Yeah.
This is my art, and it is dangerous.
Yes. Well, and there was some really neat. That's a great line. There was some really neat. I kind of like the bizarre things they do to the house. Not on the interior. The interior is really stupid. They have a nicely decorated country home. But I do like the fact that they do these interesting things on the outside where they extend out the floors to create these decks. You know,
yeah, but
I know we're supposed to find them appalling. I actually thought
because it doesn't match with the personality of the house. If it was some kind of like pseudo modern, like super modern place, that'd be one thing. But it's this, kind of I don't know what the style is, but anyway, it's like a ranch house but 2-story, and it just doesn't fit.
But again, it's people coming in who can't leave well enough alone.
Right.
So which is different. Which is a turnabout from the usual. Hey, you're living in a world where you don't fit in.
Right.
This is a world where they're being invaded by people who don't fit in, which is a different thing.
Yeah, we've just taken their perspective. It's totally a matter of we are asked to identify with the married couple the dead couple now. That their house objectively is a better way for the house to be, and we're meant to understand that the things that Catherine O'Hara wants to do this house are not to be put up with. So that's the conflict, except for in the middle of it comes this goth girl played by Winona Ryder, who also is appalled at her parents, and so she becomes.
And she can see them. She can see the ghosts.
She can see the ghosts. Oh God! I mean, Drew's exactly right. This is your dream girlfriend. You know, she has interesting clothing. She has different vision. You know, just like you do. Remember, you're 16 as well. You're going, I have a different vision no one else can see. But Winona Ryder does. She sees things that nobody else sees. And yes, absolutely. That I found myself utterly charmed by this character who is the only one who can figure out that there are ghosts in the attic, and the only one who can talk to them, and that's really, really cool. The movie actually goes very quickly. There's really only like 4 sets, right? We meet the family. We meet the first family. They get killed. The new family moves in. We want to get rid of them. And then there's the ghosts hook up with Lydia, and there's a whole big set piece involving the Dietzes, which is the new family, trying to impress their friends about how things might be haunted here, and that's what leads to the exorcism that to try to get rid of the old.
Well, there's also the amazing dinner song and dance sequence.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Does anybody want to explain this central set piece, which is the bizarre?
I'll
tell you
funny.
This much. It's when the ghosts are trying to get rid of the new family.
Well, so Beetlejuice has entered their lives now, and so he's kind of taught them a little bit, but he hasn't quite taken over yet. But he's inspired them on how to be a little scarier. And so the ghosts, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, and so they decide that they're gonna do this, take over this dinner party where it's all the folks that have just moved in plus some extra people like this, the guy Oso is his name, the interior designer guy, and a few other folks. Yeah, and so they're at this dinner and they're having, I believe it's shrimp that gets that they get attacked by. But anyway, at some point, all of a sudden, Catherine O'Hara starts to sing, but she's singing in Harry Belafonte's voice. The calypso song "Shake." What's it called? What's the title of it?
No, it's not Shake Sonora. It's
the Banana Boat
song.
Oh, the Banana Boat. You're right.
Shake Sonora later.
Right. She sings the Banana Boat song, but it's like this perfect. So it seems like she's just lip syncing to music, but it clearly is coming from her, and so everybody's kind of like, "What are you doing?" And she's dancing a little bit, and they all think she's kind of just messing with them, and she's doing some kind of gag. But then they all start to participate and dance, and it's just so very charming to see them all getting up and dance. And that's when Catherine O'Hara is really in her element, because
Dick Cavett. That's the amazing.
Dick Cavett randomly is there, but Winona Ryder's not affected because she can see the ghost, and I guess that means the magic does not work on her.
Well, they like her. They don't want to torment her.
Yeah. So she's just watching, and so they're all just dancing around, and then at some point they sit down and their dinner attacks, and like these hands come out of the dinner plates, and these shrimp attack their faces, and it's just the craziest scene. And so Alec and Gina run up to the window to see everybody take off terrified, and they don't, and it's because they think that's awesome. They're like, this is so cool. It's like that Buffy episode, Buffy the Musical, where they're just like, it's kind of fun that everybody started dancing and singing. So they just think it's great fun.
The flip side of this is immediately after that we get Beetlejuice escapes from the model and takes the form of a giant stop-motion snake with Michael Keaton's head.
And the snake had actually been filmed before, but then they edited it in to have Michael Keaton's head so it was clear that it was Beetlejuice behind it and not just random snake. I thought that was kind of weird, that scene.
I think it's a very, it's still comical, but I actually think it's a fairly effective horror scene. I mean, Beetlejuice, again, I go back to this, what I was saying about the character before. He has this sort of gleeful sadism, to him that to watch him, we've seen these people this family who is thoroughly obnoxious through most of this movie, and then finally, Beetlejuice is unleashed on them, and it's
so different. It's so different from a normal haunted house movie because I can't think of a haunted house movie. It felt more like the Harryhausen movies that we watched. It didn't feel like, the haunted house movies where usually it's all creepy and mood and maybe door slam and things, but you don't have a physical snake with a demon head grabbing people's ankles and throwing them down the stairs. That
not
just
unless
seemed
people
very
complain about
different.
it. I mean, that sort of thing was done in the remake of The Haunting. People hated it, but in this case, it's intended to be. It's just different. Burton's doing something different, but the reason why it's really weird and off-putting is that they did the whole, hey, let's haunt these guys and scare them by making them dance to Harry Belafonte, that doesn't work because everybody rightly discovers that that's kind of neat, and so they're like, okay, fine, Beetlejuice, you scare them. As Beetlejuice comes in, and he does scare them because he makes a big serpent, and
well, Beetlejuice seems to be a lot more, and maybe it's because he's been dead longer, but he seems to be a lot more powerful than any of the other ghosts. I mean, he can control his shape pretty well.
Remember, he was the woman's assistant.
Yeah,
you know,
but
like
we never see her do anything like that. I mean,
yeah, but we get the impression that she knows what the heck is going on. Like she knows, hey, don't do that. She's in charge, and so he's had time. I mean, he talks about being alive, Dark Ages, and all of that.
Yeah. And he's seen The Exorcist 350 times, and he keeps getting funnier.
Yeah. Yes, and he does. He has a lot of extra powers. Look, we don't know what kind of magic is going on, and I don't want to overly burden this with no prize explanations. But
I don't need that. Other than that, he's the ghost of the most. But I think that's cool because usually in ghost movies, you're not seeing it from the ghost's perspective the way you are with this. Like when something creepy happens. Like let's go back to Sinister for a second because you had physical manifestations of things in that movie. Yeah. You had a Bagul, you had these demon children, you had that kind of stuff, but you don't actually see this sort of maniacal planning behind that and really into the thought process. You should see Beetlejuice like, hey, what you did was lame. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn into a giant snake, and that to me is really cool.
Where we do see something like that? When you think about it, we see that kind of thing in movies like Clash of the Titans, where the gods, we cut back to the gods standing around plotting what their next trick will be, and then we go back to it. There's a Mount Olympus-like nature to seeing the ghosts and Beetlejuice plot, except for that Beetlejuice is the bad guy of this movie. He truly is. The movie has a sweetness to it, so even Beetlejuice, to an extent, he's so funny that you like him, but he's the bad guy.
Well, and the original movie, it was really supposed to be a horror movie, the original script, and it wasn't supposed to be a comedy at all. And he was killing people. He was a winged reptilian demon, and he was going to kill the main characters, and rather than frighten them away, and Maul, one of the characters. I mean, it's just tried to rape Lydia. I mean, it's definitely.
We do
down.
Get the sense that Beetlejuice is, he cusses, he grabs his crotch.
He's very sexual.
He fraternizes with demonic prostitutes. I mean, he's the least wholesome thing in this movie. I mean,
right.
The fact that. You mentioned the Joker earlier. Like, I really, I don't think about the Jack Nicholson Joker at all. I think, you see a lot of
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger, even the way the makeup looks.
Yeah. Yeah, he isn't, but he's an utterly unique character. He's neither, if he's the Joker, he's neither the Heath Ledger nor Nicholson.
I'm saying you can see echoes of the, like, I wouldn't surprise me that if you could somehow talk to Heath Ledger and you could say, oh, were you kind of inspired a little bit by Beetlejuice? I'm sure he probably would have said, oh, well, yeah, because
I think that's possible. Yeah.
I mean, even the Heath Ledger Joker voice sounds, it's not exactly, Beetlejuice is a shade gruffer, but it does sound a bit like that.
Do you get the impression, I look at this and I'm seeing aspects of like movies like Hairspray and stuff. Do you think that there's that's Waters, right? That's
John Waters, yeah.
John Waters, yeah. Do you think that there's a path of John Waters-esque, I don't know, I don't even know how to put it, just sort of gay entertainment. I haven't seen this side of Burton before, but there's something really camp going on here that he seems to abandon later on. I don't know why that is.
Really, you don't think Sweeney Todd is camp? Did we watch the same movie?
No, I guess there's no.
I don't think it's in the same way. I really don't. I don't think it feels the same at all. I don't think he's reacting to the same things. Like I kind of agree with Jason, probably even more so. I don't think that there's an intent. There is some camp, but I don't think the intention is nearly the same
fair
by
enough,
any stretch of the imagination.
There's
what about Ed Wood? What about Mars Attacks?
Ed Wood, yes.
Well,
Ed Wood,
by the way,
totally.
Mars Attacks is supposed to, but I would say that Mars Attacks is kind of also a little bit in this era, and Ed Wood is about camp. Like, it's about the things that made Tim Burton Tim Burton. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of not a really fair thing to say when author of the whole thing of Ed Wood is camp. Like, you can't escape camp. So I don't know if I.
No, but I'm not talking about movie camp. I'm talking about gay camp. I'm talking about the fact that this is definitely a much more. I mean, Otho himself would be at home in a John Waters
in a Waters something.
Absolutely,
you know?
That's what I'm thinking of. There's like all of this John Waters-y kind of stuff going on. I mean, my point is, you see somebody's early work, and you see they have like kind of several voices going on, and then as their career goes on, you'll see them drop one or two or downplay one or two, smooth them off, and elevate other things. And you kind of imagine that there might be another universe out there where Tim Burton's work takes a slightly different path. You know, it's interesting though. Yeah, this is an extraordinarily camp movie. It's not that campy a movie, but I think it's a very camp movie.
Ed Wood is definitely gay camp for sure.
No, that's true. That's absolutely true. When you think of like Bunny, the character of Bunny that was played by Bill Murray in who's such a delightful. What was he? He was just a gay actor, and he's based on the guy from Planet from Outer Space. But really, really wonderful stuff. All right. So basically, where this plot winds up taking us is that Beetlejuice has done a deal. He said, "You know what? I will help get rid of this family that has inhabited your house if." But he's developed a great interest in Winona Ryder. And what ends up happening is that when the new family does an exorcism, so that basically the old ghosts are going to die, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis's characters are going to die, Winona Ryder begs for Beetlejuice's help.
Again. Die again.
And he says, they keep bringing him out and then capturing him again. He says, okay, I'll do it, but you must marry me. Which is truly, you can see how this could also be played totally straight and become a fairly traditional, demon.
It just occurred to me this very minute that Buffy the Musical episode is based in part on this movie, actually.
I think to that. I think there is something to that.
He does that
the Zoot Suit Demon definitely, again, kind of shades of Beetlejuice in some ways.
Yes.
Well, but also the fact that he has to marry Dawn.
You're right.
So so in that final scene, Winona Ryder, basically Beetlejuice is in a purple outfit. Winona Ryder is in an insane red wedding dress, and it ends up being up to the original ghosts, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, to rescue her. And that's a big sort of bravura set piece that again is still more or less all taking place in the little house where these people live. And I don't know. We didn't really spoil it. But if there's anything you'd like to point out about that final sequence,
well, I mean, the whole sequence when he disposes of Jeffrey Jones's boss and his wife. Beetlejuice comes up out of the model with a merry-go-round sprouted out of his head, and then
he's got bat ears on, by the way.
Yeah, and he's got his hands turn into big inflato mallets, and they creates a test your strength thing, and he sends these two people catapulting out of.
Oh wait, Julia, you're breaking up. We're losing you.
He could have killed them because he sent them to the ceiling.
Wait, we're still losing you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Julia.
The voice of the afterlife.
Yeah.
But we're about to wrap up, so if you have anything else you'd like to share with us, I will. You can probably fill us in next week. My deepest apologies. I think we've lost Julia.
No, sure.
She's
well, we haven't. It sounds really bad.
Well, we can't hear you. You're chopping up. You sound like you're talking through a blender, and I'm really sorry. All right. Well, we should move on to our final thoughts about Beetlejuice anyway, because we've definitely been talking about this one for a while, and then we should come around for endorsements. So, because there's a lot here, and we could keep talking about it for a long time. But, Drew, final thoughts, Beetlejuice.
I'm glad we finally got to knock this one out. When we came back to Ghosts, I don't know why I didn't immediately think about this, because it's definitely, if I were to compile a list of favorite movies that involve ghosts, this would certainly be on the list. And it's I would say this is I don't know, it's a toss up between this and Ed Wood, but this might be my favorite Tim Burton movie from this particular time period of Tim Burton. I just, I think it encapsulates a lot of what was good about his early films, and it has a great cast. Again, Michael Keaton just makes such a big impression for actually not being in the movie that long, despite being the title character, and it's just a wonderful flick. So, we've had a good discussion going on, so I'm glad we discussed it.
I think I may even like this movie better than Ed Wood, honestly. I'm kind of coming around to that. I think this probably may bear multiple watchings more. Tony, final thoughts.
I was honestly surprised that you guys had gone so long without watching it.
Yeah. I was surprised I hadn't seen it, because, like I said, I've seen it a ton of times. It wasn't like oh man, I need to revisit. I don't know why. I'm really, really surprised we don't own it. Like, I was looking through I was like, how do I not have this? But I don't, which is just weird. I guess if it's on Blu-ray, I need to fix that. So.
Julia, do you want to talk again?
Oh,
Let's see what you sound like. I think we've lost her.
No, I'm here. Talking to me. Can you hear me?
I can hear her. Okay, well, give us a shot. What are your final thoughts on Beetlejuice?
Well, I really don't have much to add, especially if I'm breaking up. So I think
you're fine.
said it all. Oh, really? Okay, let's
yeah.
see. No, I just, like I said, I think that that if it weren't for Michael Keaton, it would be a far lesser movie, and it's great because of him, even though he's only in it for 17 minutes. So I'm really glad. But it's a fun picture, and I definitely laughed a lot, and it's colorful, which I enjoy. So I don't know, I like it. I'm glad we watched it again.
Thank you. And I was really shocked by how much I enjoyed this. I think I truly hadn't seen it since sometime I probably had not seen this movie since before I saw Ed Wood in the actual theaters. That's literally how long it's been since I've seen Beetlejuice. It just hasn't been on any kind of roster for me. So I was really pleased. This was a neat discovery. I feel like I didn't know this movie existed. Because now I can watch these things like Harry Belafonte. The movie ends with essentially almost a video of Harry Belafonte music. I can truly appreciate that stuff now, and I don't think I was even really quite aware.
I would really like to know whose decision it was to put in all the Harry Belafonte stuff, because I think that was so smart, and it makes it. They could have easily done like contemporary.
No, you're right.
New wave music or something, and I think it gives the movie so much personality, and I don't mean that in an ironic way. Like, I legitimately like the use of the music here. I think it's great.
Well, I mean, so many times as a writer or as an author or whatever, I've suggested things like this where I've gone, hey, it'd be really cool if we filled out the background with only and you could pick something, say like only music from Doc Severinsen or whatever. And people always go, I don't understand, because really quite get whatever it is that you're seeing. They don't get your vision. They don't get whatever inspiration you have.
That is
to be able to do this in a movie, you have to really punch your way through that stuff.
That is another thing that I will have to give Burton credit for, is that he was able to, he was able to push through, like you said, and create his own little world where he could do that. Whereas a lot of other people might have done exactly what you said and tried it, and people go, that is stupid. No way, I'm not bankrolling that.
Yeah.
In the same way that while, and I saw him speak about this, and he was I think we talked about it on The Nightmare Before Christmas, while Henry Selick really was a huge driving force, the fact that Burton was attached and could be the director, producer, do all the stuff he did on Nightmare Before Christmas, paved the way for them to make Nightmare Before Christmas without nearly the kind of oversight they might have had in that thing. I think that there's a lot of ways that Henry Selick maybe doesn't get the credit he should have in a major way, but you could tell that when he was speaking that he also knew exactly what Tim Burton brought and why it was essential that happened the way it was. And I think that's one of the things that for better or worse, even though there is some self-parody and stuff like that, eventually in his, in his film career, that this era, why we talk about this is because here's a guy who really has a vision, a really awesome vision, and one that lots of people, not just us, like the people who listen to this podcast will understand why why these films are important to them, and why that it matters, and there's a the fact that they let somebody do all this stuff and have this music randomly, and it became part of a pop culture thing. Again, unfortunately, I think it turned back into kind of an irony thing where people go, aha, here's an old thing that I like, and I like it because it's old, and that's ironic, ha ha ha. Like,
I
it
have
turns
a lot
into that,
of,
but that's not Tim Burton's fault. It's how it, you have a time, and then that happens. But for us, it was just a cool, like, hey, that's cool, and maybe it even got some people like, man, maybe my parents' records aren't so like crummy now, or my grandparents' records. Whoever had this stuff,
Speaking as somebody that 90% of what I listen to is stuff that came out before I was born, and in the most unironic way.
Yeah.
Like I think most of that music is legitimately better than what we have today. I would be shocked if Tim Burton, was looking at these songs in any tongue-in-cheek way.
I'm not saying that at this point in time that happened. What I'm saying is there's been a course since this movie that has since turned it back around to where I think there was a really good Simpsons episode, if I remember correctly. It had John Waters in it, where it's all the differentiation between kitsch and like irony and how that all works and everything. It was really.
There was also a great episode of Daria about.
Yeah, and the two are kind of intermingle. Actually, they're kind of in my brain. They're very similar episodes in a lot of that way.
They were getting into the people were getting into listening to a lot of swing and dressing up all swing, but at the same time there were purists also who were like. I mean, by the way, everybody in that episode was horrible, okay? So there were the people who were into retro swing because it was ironic, and people who were into it because they really loved it, but in a sort of really snooty and dismissive kind of way. By the way, Drew, I'm with you. I mean, I spend all my time listening to, like, 60s acid jazz, and I don't know the difference between... I can't imagine spending hours of your day listening to music you don't like. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, I mean, I would rather listen to Little Richard than Skrillex or any day of the week. Like that's that's not music. That's not music to me. And I guess there is this sort of like knee jerk, oh, it's retro, thing, but it's like whatever, like
And you like what you like.
Yeah. And if for the people who are, kind of coming at it from like an ironic standpoint, I'm contemptuous of that, but it's, you can't really stop it.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, I mean, I have my own things. Like, it's kind of hard not to listen to Hulk Hogan's record, CD, cassette, which is I had it on cassette, unironically.
I think that's true. Yes.
It's very hard. And for a while, actually, and I've kind of rescinded this. I've kind of gone back on this. Like, there was a time where I kind of switched that way where Man of War, I thought, was kind of like that. And I think I've come back around where I think Man of War is pretty awesome.
I think it's hard to listen to cassettes, unironically.
I still have a dual cassette player in my hi-fi stereo that I have a bunch of cassettes. I have that. Some of them recorded, no less, where it's like a mix from
a mixtape
from the 90s.
Did a girl make it for you? It for you?
Oh, I do actually have a mixtape that Rain made for me, and a mixtape I made for Rain. In fact, that was one of the things that she gave me a mixtape this one time when I was too stupid to realize that, like things were cool. Yeah, no. Well, she gave it to me after a show, and I was like, we both went to this one concert together here in Austin, and I was like, well, I'm gonna play it cool, which was stupid of me because I've never been really cool. But I was like, no, I've gotta like go home. I'll see you later. And I got this look, and I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, wait. Oh, yeah, I just got a mixtape. We should have hung out all night, dummy. And so, but I still have that. But I still have that mixtape.
Tony, you might not have been cool in dating, but you are cool in other,
Tony,
well, I hope so, because I sure was not ever cool.
We all have our bouts with lack of cool. I think.
Drew, did a girl ever make you a mixtape?
Did a girl ever make me a mixtape?
Yeah.
No, but I actually gave Jamie not a mixtape, but 2 mixed CDs when we were still in the long distance phase of our relationship. So
that's cool.
So I relate to what you were talking about. So it's
I mean, Joya, I know I made you a mixtape. Did you get a lot of mixtapes when you were young? When you were like younger?
Boy, this is a really dangerous conversation. I'm going to back away slowly.
Do we really want this to be on record?
Yeah, exactly. It is recorded on the internet.
Yeah, recorded live, no less.
I should point out, we've only been married for 20 years, okay? There was a period of time prior to that 20 years when it was okay to get mixtapes from other people. That's so.
Well, anyway, I do still have my cassette, and I do listen to them from time to time, unironically, because, in fact, there was the band Rigor Mortis. I started to pick up their CD, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I picked up their new one, which is awesome. But I was like, oh, man, that CD's expensive. I have that on cassette. And I didn't buy it because, well, I should have bought it anyway. But I was trying to, parcel out my money and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I can still listen to that Rigor Mortis release on cassette.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Awesome.
We should probably do endorsements.
Yes.
Yes, we should definitely do endorsements because I've completely lost the plot about what we were talking about, other than mixtapes.
Mixtapes.
Drew, but I really enjoyed the question of the day, and I'm tempted to begin that. Like, did you get mixtapes? I'm going to think about.
We should ask our Facebook group if they ever.
Did you ever get or give a mixtape?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'd love to know.
And do you do mixed playlist? Because that's the new thing now.
I've started doing that on here. This will lead us into endorsements. On my Spotify, I have started doing Halloween Man-based mix lists.
Oh,
so I just put up one for the character of Lucy on Facebook. I'm creating a soundtrack for the new Vampire Story arc that starts this month, so people can dig in that if they want to search me out on Spotify.
Ooh, Jason,
the other thing I have, huh?
I said, Jason, we should do that for SciComm.
You should. I used to create mix CDs for my creative team when they were drawing things, and this is kind of the logical extent of that.
I like it.
But my other endorsement on Netflix, I missed this in the theater, and it cropped up on Netflix last week, is the movie Snowpiercer, which is from the same director as the Korean monster movie The Host. And it's a science fiction movie about this is going to sound ludicrous, but it's a post-apocalyptic future where the entire world is frozen over, and a few surviving people are on this humongous train where the haves and have-nots are divided up on which part of the train they're on, and the sort of people in the caboose, which are the worker cast, are led by Chris Evans, which you know from the Captain America movies.
Sure.
Leads a revolt to work their way up to the front to overthrow Ed Harris, who is it's got a great international cast. It's really, really quirky on top of being like a great dystopian science fiction movie. And, the thing I keep saying is like, they keep talking about remaking Escape from New York. We don't need a remake of Escape from New York. We have this, which follows a lot of the same themes. And, Chris Evans keeps talking about how he wants to retire from acting when he's done doing Captain America. That's a shame because he's he's grown into being a really reliable action hero. And I greatly enjoyed watching, him play a slightly, like I said, kind of a Snake Plissken type character. So this is a lot of fun. So if you have Netflix, or if you just get a chance to check it out in some other way, you should check out Snowpiercer. Because I think it's really impressive.
Jason loves Snake Plissken so much that he dressed up as him for Halloween one time.
Yes.
I'll mirror Drew because I actually saw Snowpiercer. A friend of mine had an import Blu-ray, I think the French version, and then I saw it again in the theater, and it actually worked better the second time in the theater. So I would say watch it twice. It's based on a graphic novel, by the way.
Yeah,
a French graphic novel.
French graphic novel, right?
Which Jason and I we can vouch for those.
Was it a humanoid? Was it from Humanoids, Tony?
No, it wasn't Humanoids. I forgot what the publisher was. I looked that up first because I was like, hey, we should see if we can get that because that's pretty
true.
cool.
Tony and I, one of our big, Clockworks, which we keep mentioning, very strangely came out in French first, which is hilarious because we did not write it in French. But, wow. Okay, that's a great one. Drew. Did you have anything else besides Snowpiercer, or is that your...
I have a kind of a half-hearted... I'm often doing this with genre television. I have a half-hearted endorsement of Salem, which also cropped up on Netflix this week, which is a highly, and I have to say, highly fictionalized take on the Salem witch trials. It's extremely cheesy. Like I can't emphasize it enough.
Doesn't it take place in modern times, Salem?
No. You're thinking of Sleepy Hollow. This is like somebody did. The tone of this is vaguely in between Witchfinder General and a Bodice Ripper novel, but it has some very interesting horror imagery. Like in particular, one of the town heads is married to a witch, and she keeps him paralyzed by continuously stuffing a demonic toad in and out of his throat, and. That's why I could not completely dismiss the show, because it had stuff like that, which is absolutely gruesome and wonderful.
But there's a TV series that Stephen King is the executive producer of. It's on one of the cable channels that has a title like Salem or something like that. But now
I don't think this was this, because this seemed pretty low rent. I mean, it's filmed in Shreveport.
Okay,
So.
I'm with you. All right, outstanding.
Under the Dome is the only one.
No.
Under the Dome.
That's, if I think of it, I will let you know. I thought it was called Salem, but it doesn't matter. Julia, do you have any endorsements for us?
Well, you know what? I've been talking about Buffy the Musical, so I'm going to go ahead and endorse Buffy the Musical.
All right.
That is a worthy endorsement indeed.
Well, and if you haven't seen it, then seeing
project.
it will increase your enjoyment of this particular podcast. So, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, anything to lay on us?
Yeah, I have a couple. The first one I saw at Fantastic Fest two Fantastic Fests ago, and it was fairly divisive. I had a bunch of people that hated it and a bunch of people that thought it was really fun. I still think it's kind of fun. It's a movie that just showed up on Netflix called Witchin' and Bitchin', and it's pretty fun. You know, I can see why people didn't like it, but a bunch of bank robbers leave. They're all dressed up in costumes. The bank robbery is really great at the beginning. They end up coming upon a coven of witches. You know, crazy, you know, horror comedy-esque kind of stuff happens. I thought it was really fun and pretty cool. So I would endorse Witchin' and Bitchin'. And also, if you like thrillers, there's a movie called Blackout, and I say it like that because it's two words, not to confuse with another movie called Blackout. That's all one word. The guy wakes up, there's a dead body beside him. He's on his wedding day, so he has to try to, or is it the day before? Anyway, he has to try to coordinate getting his wedding actually to happen, as well as finding out why there's a body beside him and what he doesn't remember. So it's him going back and forth between being this gangster kind of guy and also like, no, honey, I'll totally be at the reception, you know. So the pressure's on. I thought it was pretty fun, and that's also on Netflix. Also, if you are listening to this and you are in Austin, Deserts of Mars, to which I'm the singer and bassist for, we are playing a show at the Lost Well on the 15th, which is Saturday. There's a lot of great bands, like 6 bands for $7. And closing out the night is a band from Dallas called Mothership, which I can also highly endorse. Mothership's really great. They've been to Europe this past year. They're really, really picking up steam. They're releasing their second CD. This is the Austin CD release party for Mothership. So if you're around and you want to hang out and, you know, talk metal and horror and all that, I'll post that on the website. It's been a long time. This new lineup of Deserts of Mars I'm really feeling good about, and it'll be our first gig together out and about. So that's going to be cool. So if you're in Austin and you listen to this, you know, come check out Deserts of Mars. It'd be great to have you. So
very cool. All right, I have 2 things that I want to mention. One, I'm surprised that nobody mentioned this, but it blew my mind when it started just assaulting the internet a few days ago or about a week ago, which is Too Many Cooks. Too Many Cooks, an 11-minute short film that originally premiered in the middle of the night on Adult Swim, and they shoved it in actually right after Adult Swim during the period for infomercials. It's just an 11-minute short film that is essentially a parody of introductions to sitcoms that starts out just to be a regular sort of Full House style sitcom intro, but then starts to get extraordinarily weird and then disturbing and even unnerving as it goes along. And I don't mean unnerving because they just keep adding family members and there's no way that one show could have so many people in its cast, but unnerving because reality starts to bend, it becomes a science fiction show, it becomes a slasher. There's just all kinds of horribleness going on. It blew my mind. Truly one of the most memorable things I've seen in a while. I'll say no more about it. That's Too Many Cooks. And also, The Returned is playing again on AMC. And The Returned, which will soon be in an English version, but you can catch it on AMC in repeats. And this show is about a little town in the mountains of France where the dead have just started to come back to life, which I know sounds an awful lot like whatever that show was that was in English this past season, but that was different.
It's still on. Resurrection.
Yes, it's a different story from Resurrection. It's just very similar. But it was good. It was first, and there's soon going to be an American remake. But I totally recommend The Returned. Not The Resurrection, but The Returned. So, very cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. I am so thankful that you guys could be with us once more, and everybody listening, thank you once again. Let your friends know about the show. Come to the Facebook page and let us know what you thought of this episode. Let us know if anybody ever made you a mixtape. We want to know. And join us in all these conversations and more.
I want to know if anybody ever made you a bad mixtape.
Oh, God, I'd love to know about bad mixtapes. Because what would you say?
I did make a mixtape for one girlfriend, and there was one song that I just thought was awesome. And she did tell me, I never want to hear that again, ever.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh, well, I guess.
Sad. Poor Tony.
Yeah.
Were you through after that?
No, well, eventually. But, I guess that was a sign.
I think I can honestly say, and I can say this with complete honesty, that Joya is the only person I ever made a mixtape for.
Aww.
Awesome.
That's the truth.
So nice.
That's the truth. Okay, so
next week is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right?
Next week we are no longer.
Segue. Julia's the only one I ever made a mixtape for, and next week is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, it's because I associate you with that movie now because you refuse to watch it.
Yeah, we're going to have
already. I don't like it.
because Julia is going to take the week off as we discuss the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I can't wait to discuss this one. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm sure, I have no doubt that we will be back on the Haunted House Retrospective in another half year or so because, God knows.
We're doing Poltergeist. We're going to
do Poltergeist. Poltergeist
it's penciled in.
Its own retrospective, Poltergeist. So, all right. Fantastic. See you next week. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody.